You've more than likely heard our desires in a general manager, but now let's run through the actual backgrounds of some candidates.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmasto, joined by my wonderful partner in crime, Nick Zararis. Nick, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here. We actually have some stuff to talk about that's moderately productive as opposed to just kind of openly speculating.
Yeah.
So that we got that going for us.
It's great. It's a great day to just enjoy the nice weather, hopefully wherever you are, and listen to some Locked On Flames, and also download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On NHL for $20 off of your first purchase. So today we are going to be talking about a number of candidates, their background, what they would bring to the Flames, and is it realistic to want them? And Nick is a saint and compiled this list and everyone's resume, so make sure you're giving him credit, not me.
This is easy. This is just aggregation. Aggregation's easy to do. So generally speaking, you want to be realistic in who you're shooting to hire, but at the same time, if you're not aiming high, you probably shouldn't be making the decisions about who the GM is going to be to begin with. If there's somebody out there that you think that's out of reach, then you're not thinking big enough for your organization.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are all hockey people. They're all in your sphere of orbit. Whatever your market you're in, whatever budget you have, if you're eliminating candidates based on, well, we don't think they would want to come here, you're not giving yourself enough credit. Make your job desirable, that if somebody wants to come there, you're going to do everything in their power to make their job easier. So while some guys and women on this list have been linked to other organizations already and not the Flames specifically, I do have them on the list for the purposes of this conversation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, really, when you get into, I feel like any profession, you really don't want to limit yourself. You want to say, this goal is possible. This is how we're going to get there. This candidate is this person. We are going to make them want to work here. And we're going to provide them with all they need to have a successful, run as a general manager and or coach. So who do you have first on your list?
Well, I've got the biggest name first. These are in no particular order. If I was going to rank them in order, this guy is probably lowest in terms of probability of it happening, but he'd be pretty close to the top of my desired candidates, and that's Kyle Dubas, the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. His contract is set to expire whenever the Leafs are eliminated from the playoffs. That could be as soon as Friday. It could be as long as the end of June. So that's the risk with some of these guys and women who are associated with teams that are still active in the playoffs. Teams don't typically give permission for candidates to interview while their team is still active in the playoffs. But Kyle's got a really nice resume. He's not that old. He's got significant experience for somebody who's as young as he is. Mm-hmm. Significant amount of time with the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds. Everybody makes the joke whenever a former Greyhound is available in the NHL, they typically end up on the Leafs because Kyle looks out for his guys. He's been in the Maple Leafs organization since 2014. He became the general manager in 2018. His first big move as general manager was signing John Tavares as a free agent. He's inherited the bulk of this roster. Guys like Morgan Riley, Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitch Marner. Those guys were there before he became the full general manager. But he's turned over a significant portion of that roster. They've kind of been in this same roster state for a while now, where they've fluctuated on goalie, they fluctuated on defense. They've gone out and been aggressive at deadlines pretty consistently since they broke through that first year, taking Washington to 7 games as a really young group that nobody really expected anything from. But the thing I like about Kyle is, he's not one of the dinosaurs who's been around forever, that he's got relatively practical experience. he's always been willing to take shots on guys who maybe have had tough goes of it in other locations and been willing to give them time. I think about Alex Galchenyuk in the 56-game season where the Leafs brought him in and really slow played him along, not saying we're going to see what we can do. We're going to put him in positions to maximize his skill set, not so much focus on what he can't do, but what he can do. Kyle's been linked to Pittsburgh most aggressively from the reports we've read already. The idea being that Pittsburgh would be offering him the president of hockey operations job, not the general manager job. But the Flames shouldn't rule themselves out. They should ask if and when the Leafs are eliminated to talk to him. Even if he says no, at least he said no, as opposed to not talking to him at all.
So for those who don't know or maybe need clarification, what is the difference between a general manager and the president of hockey operations?
So your GM is more directly in control of your roster. Your president is going to be your liaison between the business side, the hockey side, and typically the president will serve as the intermediary between the general manager and the owner. Typically speaking, the president's job is to kind of keep the hockey and the business in a line, whereas the general manager's job is just the hockey.
Gotcha. Okay. I think that, Kyle Dubas is going to be on everyone's radar. I think that you would be an idiot to, say, oh, I don't want him on my team. I think that he has done a fine job. I mean, has there been a year where the Leafs haven't made the playoffs with him as
exactly. Exactly.
And I feel like that's what you need. And we've talked about that a lot, especially right after Tree Living left, was 50% of the time in those 9 years. He was making the playoffs, or the team was making the playoffs. The team he assembled made the playoffs, and that's not good enough. You need to have that repetition and something to get you there, because you're not going out there and just assembling a roster and making a go at the Stanley Cup and successfully.
No.
That's not how the NHL works.
And he's shown a willingness to get creative. They've done things like bringing in guys on veteran minimums like Spezza and Giordano to kind of prolong the window because they've got a significant amount of cap tied up in a handful of players. But he's shown a willingness to be creative, to listen to others, because that's been a lot of the deadline ads when they traded for Foligno, this year when they traded for Ryan O'Reilly, kind of leaning into the old hockey men wisdom and not only being insistent that he knows the way. The next one I have on the list is Matthew Darsh, the director of hockey operations for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's been linked to a handful of jobs. He's been a variety of roles. He had a non-hockey background before he got this job with the Lightning, worked with I want to say it was a finance company in Canada before taking this job with the Lightning. He does a lot of the money stuff for the Lightning in terms of managing the salary cap and that type of thing. He was also, something I found interesting that I thought makes him unique compared to these other guys. He was a player rep during both the AHL and NHL player lockouts in 2013 and 2018 as a former player representing the players' needs during those times. So that's something that shows he's got, some acumen and more than just a hockey sense, is decent at managing people. He was a finalist for the Canucks job last fall before they ended up hiring Patrick Alvin. This is a guy who is waiting for his first opportunity. He probably won't have to wait much longer. There's a good chance he ends up with a job this cycle, but if not this cycle, this is somebody who is a guy in waiting. He will be eventually an NHL general manager.
Yeah, and I think it's important to diversify your experience. Your resume should not just be hockey, hockey, hockey. There should be, a good mix of things to prove that you can balance and juggle the responsibilities of the general manager position, because
absolutely
it's just common sense. You're not going to want to teams have done it. Just throw a former player or someone with leadership and a hockey resume out there, and you're not guaranteed for success just because you have a hockey resume.
Exactly.
And tell these people that, but that's
and the one last point I want to make before we move on. prior success is no guarantee of future success. You need to understand what made people successful at these other stops and to see if you can replicate it. Because it's one thing to just take somebody from another organization. Are you going to be able to run your organization the way they were successful in the other place? Because if not, don't bring that person in. That's the one last thing I want to get in.
Yes, absolutely. And coming up next, we will continue to run through our list of general manager candidates. But before we do that, I do want to take a quick break to tell you about Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. I cannot stress that enough. It should be as easy as finding the event, clicking the seats you want, adding to cart, and moving on and preparing for your fun event. Gametime is the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. This summer is the perfect time to take advantage of Gametime's flash deals and exclusive tickets, exclusive deals, and a Gametime guarantee means you'll always have the best price. And if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Get images of your seats before you buy, so you know exactly what you're going to be looking at. Is it an obstructed view? Do I have a good view, especially for baseball games? I feel like I can be a little picky when it comes to that. So figure it out on Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And thanks everyone for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're getting your podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. Who is the next contestant on Do I Want This Job with the Calgary Flames?
So this one is a little surprising, but I've seen his name mentioned more than once in relation to the Flames, and that's John Chayka, the former Coyotes general manager, who kind of like, abruptly resigned, got the Coyotes in a lot of trouble, got himself in a lot of trouble for the way his tenure ended in Arizona. But he's worked with Don Maloney, which is going to be a recurring theme of a lot of the candidates on this list. But he'd been the youngest general manager ever hired in the NHL. He was 26 years old when he got the job in 2016 with the Coyotes, has a background in analytics, had an analytics company before taking the job with Arizona. He was suspended from the NHL for an indeterminate amount of time for seeking jobs with other organizations while still being under contract with the Coyotes for another 3 seasons. Also ran that private combine for prospects that got the Coyotes in a lot of trouble, that got them docked a second and a first-round draft pick. So this is somebody who only 33 years old, still very young in their hockey life, has shown a willingness to kind of be risky. I mean, a 26-year-old having the confidence to say, yeah, I'll be the general manager of your hockey team in a known difficult situation like Arizona with a difficult owner, arena issues, money issues, market issues, attendance issues, and be like, yeah, I can do this. It takes a certain amount of hubris to do that. But I would probably say this is unlikely based on the fact that how things ended in Arizona and because of his ties to Maloney in Arizona and how that went. But his name was floated as somebody that the Flames may or may not talk to, so he was worth mentioning.
Yeah, and I think that there's a certain level and amount of risk that you should be willing to take.
Yes,
as
definitely.
A general manager or really in any position in hockey, but I don't know if that includes running secret combines and snooping for other jobs while you're under contract.
The looking for other jobs thing I could understand. That man was in Arizona. He was scrolling through Indeed, begging me, please, somebody get me out of here. My owner won't let me keep anybody. My owner won't let me. Like, everybody. He resigned the day before the bubble playoffs started. He resigned.
That's right.
He resigned the day before the playoffs started. The Coyotes won that first round series with Taylor Hall, which I still forget Taylor Hall was a Coyote there for a hot minute.
Money laundering situation. That's all that was.
Yes, it was.
Allegedly.
So next up, we've got Jason Botterill, the assistant general manager in Seattle. This is somebody the Flames would have to wait to talk to. Somebody who I think is probably the first choice for Pittsburgh because he was the Pittsburgh assistant general manager for so long. It didn't go well for him in Buffalo, but that situation was really challenging. And it seems like he's going to get another shot regardless of whether or not I think his time in Buffalo kind of raises red flags. Significant time in the Penguins organization, 3 seasons as the Buffalo GM, came on board with, why can't I think of the Seattle general manager's name? I'm drawing a blank. He was with the Carolina Hurricanes, and this is terrible
Ron
radio.
Francis?
I think it's Ron Francis. Yeah, I think it's Ron Francis. Yes, it is Ron Francis. Good job. But yeah, no, they brought him on to kind of do the, if things go well here, you'll get another job really quickly. And if you don't, we're going to suck. So you'll have job security kind of thing, which is what anybody joining an expansion franchise is looking for.
Yeah. And, I think with the Flames, just someone with experience, but also not
too much. You don't want too much experience. Yeah. Because after a certain point, you are what you are as an executive. There are plenty of guys who need a second or a third try to get it, coach or GM. Usually it's 2. If you mess up twice, you usually don't get a third try. You have to have a certain baseline level of competence to get past a second try.
Yeah.
And it seems like Botterill's going to get a look. I think it probably ends up being in Pittsburgh, and you see Kyle as the president of hockey ops there, but he's worth bringing up for sure based on the extensive time in the Pittsburgh organization. He did orchestrate the Ryan O'Reilly trade, which took 4.5 years for Tage Thompson to become something good. But Tage Thompson's a good player. He gets credit for that.
Yeah. And I think, going back to the whole experience thing, we don't want someone that is a spring chicken with no experience coming in, running through this organization. But at the same time, we don't want someone who is so stubborn and set in their ways because we've seen that. Yeah. We lived it, we breathed it, we're moving on from our mistakes. So just a happy, healthy balance of things.
Yeah, definitely. So next up, I have Eric Tuslkey, the Carolina assistant general manager. This is probably the smartest guy in hockey. He has a PhD in chemistry and a PhD in physics. This guy's probably too smart to be in hockey, but is probably enjoying being in hockey as opposed to around science and math people. So multiple patents. That's not really pertinent to hockey, but this is a really smart person. He's written a number of papers that are useful for practically understanding hockey, the impact of zone entries with control, the peak of statistical production, the value of penalties drawn versus penalties taken. There's a lot of real underlying stuff. I mean, this is somebody who had a hockey blog, and the Hurricanes were like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about, even though he didn't have a job in hockey. And this is somebody who's got, I think, a real shot at getting a job this cycle. I'd be surprised if he didn't. There are a number of jobs, especially somewhere that's got kind of a need to kind of reset. But the thing with somebody like this is he's going to wait for the perfect landing spot. This is somebody who's very comfortable in their job currently with Carolina, has a lot of autonomy and decision-making power, even though he's only the assistant GM there, somebody who has a real say in a lot of their decisions because they manage their cap very frugally. They don't throw out money very willy-nilly. Carolina's made a lot of cheap financial decisions, frankly, where they've gotten out of guys who were tied up in big money for the sake of looking for cheaper versions of that. The most obvious one, of course, letting Dougie Hamilton walk and trading for Tony DeAngelo. That's the most obvious one. But the Hurricanes have looked to cut costs in places. And in a market like Calgary that does have some financial constraints, might have to get inventive in terms of who you can get based on who wants to go there. Somebody like Eric would be a good decision based on that because he's shown a willingness to be really creative and really innovative, frankly, in terms of thinking, not even just process, but just the thought, the ideas and the ways we think about hockey, as opposed to just the actionable decisions. He would write the textbook for decision making, as opposed to just speaking about decision making.
Yeah. So I don't know if I've ever shared this story on the podcast, but how I got into hockey, as an adult and not just watching men skate on the ice as a child, was I Googled hockey for dummies. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Eric Tuslkey would greatly benefit however old I was when I did that. But
for sure. Eric, go read his papers. They're out there.
I
Go
will.
read his papers on aging curve, impact of possession when gaining the zone, penalties taken versus drawn. Yeah,
Why
this
wouldn't you want that guy in your front office?
it's a great. He's going to wait for the perfect landing spot, would be my assumption. I know he's interviewed last 2 job cycles, but I feel like he's probably waiting for the perfect situation to make the jump from assistant to the guy in the big chair.
Yeah, and hopefully, I feel like everybody's kind of like Eric Tuslkey, and it feels like a pipe dream, but those are kind of the guys that you want to be reaching for. And
yeah.
we talked about in the beginning, you want to have someone that you feel is so outside of your realm. I mean, I don't know what they're thinking in Calgary, but just from my take on things that I'm seeing, you want that. You want to just make that attainable and have his pen to paper as soon as possible.
Definitely.
But coming up next, we are going to wrap up the show with some more final candidates and some fun facts about them. And thanks everyone for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you are following and subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, because we are here for you every single day. Do you have any dark horses that you're going to surprise me with?
One of the last 2 of the main list is a dark horse candidate, somebody who's probably a year or 2 away from serious consideration for the job. So we'll leave that person for after. So we'll do Craig Conroy next, assistant GM for the Flames for a number of years. Why can't I remember who said? Oh yeah, it was Brian Burke who did an interview a few weeks ago who had said the plan was when I was with Calgary was for him to eventually take the job. We were bringing him along so that eventually he could take the job. And I think there's a good chance that this is ultimately what happens. I hope the Flames do as much research as they can, talk to as many people as they can. But if they feel good about Conroy taking this job, sure. He's got Jerome McGinley's endorsement. For what's that worth? McGinley did an interview with The Athletic at the end of April and said he hopes that the Flames give Conroy the job. But in terms of practical experience, it's the other assistant GM who's further down this list, Brad Pascal, who manages the Wranglers and their day-to-day. So we'll talk about him in a little bit. I'm open to Conroy, first-time GM, like a lot of the guys on this list, somebody who's been waiting for quite a while for their opportunity, frankly. There's a good chance that if they hire someone else, he might leave the organization and look for an opportunity somewhere else. And I wouldn't blame him. You got to look for ways to advance yourself. But we'll see on that front.
Yeah, I feel like, especially, he's been groomed for this position.
Yes.
Like, he's been with the organization for a very long time. He probably knows the ins and outs better than anyone else in this spot right now. So, I hope that they do give him a solid consideration, but they also don't put all their eggs in one basket because it's the quote unquote right thing to do.
Exactly. Any process you want as much as you can. And then the outlier, the dark horse, she's only been with the Leafs for 2 years in an official capacity, and that's Haley Wickenheiser. We're thinking outside the box a little bit. She's probably a year or 2 away from serious consideration for an NHL GM job. She's the director of player development for the Leafs right now. That's her official title. This is one of the most accomplished athletes in women's sports ever. She's also a doctor. So we're talking about somebody who can figure it out. This is somebody who, no matter what they've done at any prior steps in their lives, they've been able to figure it out. And it's one of the reasons I've strongly been advocating more teams take chances on women, minorities, is you are going to get the best of the best, because these are people who haven't been given opportunities before. When you are going to the same pool of the same guys over and over again, there's a certain threshold of resume you are not going to see. The best guys are already snatched up. When you go outside of the club and you go into those pools that haven't been tapped into, you are going to get the best of the best. This is somebody who's got gold medals in hockey and softball, is a doctor, and is the director of player development for the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is somebody who genuinely has been successful at everything they've done in their entire life. And I think Haley's probably, if she wants to take that next step up and be a hockey person full-time, probably a year or 2 away, but I felt like she was worth mentioning in consideration for this list because she's got a good resume. She she's got a bona fide resume. And frankly, if this was a man, would have probably had a job opportunity earlier than the last 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think with just her resume in itself, it shows that she can wear multiple hats and succeed.
Yes.
And it takes someone special to be able to not only be like a multifaceted athlete, a multi-sport athlete, but to be an Olympian and a gold medalist and all that. And
a doctor.
And just super casually a doctor. I mean, to fit that in there on top of all your training and everything, like I barely survived community college working a part-time job, but that's why I'm not cut out for general manager life. But, I think, like you said, there are people out there that aren't necessarily on the athletics list or a TSN list because they're not a white man that has been in this industry for 65 years.
Or someone's son or nephew or cousin, like Chris Lamoriello or Rick Bonus's son, who I did read on more than one list, Rick Bonus's son, Lou Lamoriello's son. Those are the ones that annoy you. Those are the ones that annoy you.
Especially, just because you've watched your dad do this or your uncle do this for so many years doesn't mean you can do the same. This isn't like driving a car. You can pick up on little things, what to do, what not to do, but assembling a hockey roster and trying to navigate trades and drafts and all, no. You learn some tricks along the way, but it's not the same. And I think that, okay, so it's the middle of May, just about. When do you think they make their decision? Since
I would assume end of the month, the latest, because they still need to hire the coach too, which is why they need to figure out the GM sooner rather than later. I would be surprised if it takes another 2 weeks, unless they have their heart set on talking to somebody whose team is still alive in the playoffs, in which case it could be different. If they really want to talk to Tuslkey or Botterill, they might have to wait and see, and then you might end up with your second or third choice, but it's up to them ultimately. And real quick, I'll run through some other ones. There's Mike Futa, who was with the LA Kings in hockey operations. He's somebody I think that if Daryl had stayed would have been in real consideration because he'd worked with Daryl for a significant amount of time. We talked about Stan Bowman not really being in consideration, but his name being out there based on what we've heard. There's Brad Pascal, the other Flames assistant general manager who oversees the Wranglers day-to-day. Scotty Nickel, who is the assistant general manager for the Nashville Predators. He might be leaving because Barry Trotz is taking over as general manager, might want to bring in his own people. This is somebody who played for the Flames, decent NHL career, hung around for a while. I feel like he's somebody who needs a little bit more seasoning. There's Shane Doan, same thing in Arizona. He's currently the director of hockey outreach in Arizona, which is more of a community relations thing as opposed to a hockey development. There's Ray Whitney, who's in the Department of Player Safety, somebody who was a finalist for the San Jose Sharks job last year. And then there's Sean Burke, who's somebody who's been a coach for a long time and has been rumored to wanting to make the leap up to the general manager role, but he's only been a goalie coach. I don't think you can go from goalie coach to general manager. Probably somebody who needs some time as an assistant GM. Just wanted to really cover all my bases as far as who this could be. Yeah,
and I think that any good organization is going to do their due diligence, and maybe some teams can afford to wait. And I don't know if the Flames are one of those teams. I think that the sooner they lay a new foundation and get things kind of going in the leadership direction, the sooner we see possible extensions and just more moves and actual hockey things, and not me getting excited about seeing Oliver Shillington skating.
Hey man, baby steps. We take the small victories. Hockey season is long, the off season is longer. You take your small victories.
Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly may the best candidate win, and I hope that the rest of the season, the playoffs, go well for everyone. Matthew Tkachuk is having a heck of a time. Sam Bennett, another former Flame, he needs to settle down, but that's okay. But yeah, so let us know your thoughts because we would love to hear them. I think it's really interesting to get other people's opinions on who might be on your radar versus mine, or someone who's in Calgary. I don't know. But make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames on YouTube, as well as wherever you get your audio podcasts. And we'll be here for you every single day through this off season. Tomorrow's Friday. We'll wrap up the week with some goalie conversations, and we'll see what the new week brings.